party souls that were here tonight. Thank you very much. You get bonus points at the end. My name is Beth Portocalis. I work for Medford Township. I'm the liaison to the Environmental Affairs Committee. We have a couple members of the committee here tonight. Chip is our chair. Jen Gander is our vice chair. Isabella comes to our meetings regularly from the PPA and ANJAC. Paula Gailey also has been participating in our meetings, and we're privileged tonight to have Mayor Watson joining us at the meeting. So at this point, you don't want to hear me speak. I'm going to turn it over to Isabella, and we'll get the program started and hopefully get you out of here and in your canoes to get back to
Yeah, the river should come right up to here, so we'll be ready to go.
There's a nice basin in the back if you want to take a swim.
So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of our speakers tonight. So, like Beth said, I'm Isabella Castiglione, work with both the Pinelands Preservation Alliance and ANJAC. And tonight we're working together to bring you this creek-friendly yards presentation, where we're going to talk to you all about different changes that you can take at home, or actions that you can take at home to kind of improve water quality and reduce the amount of pollution going out into the environment. So we're going to start it off with Rich Bizub from Pinelands Preservation Alliance, who's going to talk about our Pinelands water resources. Next is going to be Jason Schaaf, right? Did I get it right?
You got it.
Yeah, from Mill Creek Apiary, who's going to talk about native or pollinators and the importance of pollinator habitat, and again, like different types of pollution, how we can affect their habitat. And I'll wrap it up with how you can create your creek-friendly yard at home. So if you have any questions throughout the presentations, feel free to stop us and ask us as we're going along, and otherwise we'll have time for questions at the end of each presentation that you can ask. We also have materials up here that you can take. Our septic presenter wasn't able to make it tonight. She actually got hit pretty bad by the last round of storms. But we do have ANJAC's paper on septic systems up here. And then we also have our book on creek-friendly yards and stormwater management. So thank you guys for making it out tonight.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. Again, Rich Bizub, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I'm our director for water programs, and I've been with PPA for almost 22 years. Prior to that, working for environmental consulting companies. So my background is water for the past almost 43 years already. So what I'm going to do is just kind of put a little bit of a framework to this, focus a little bit on water quantity and water quality, and how it all relates to the pinelands. In the pinelands, whenever you ride around, you see streams, rivers, and wetlands. Over 95% of that water comes from the groundwater system. So you really have to, when you talk about surface water, you really have to talk about the groundwater part of the equation also. Well, it's really hard to believe that in the most densely populated state in the nation, if you just go back, you can still see something like that. That's pretty incredible. This is taken from Forest Fire Tower in Ocean County, looking into Burlington County, looking to the southwest. And it's pretty remarkable to be able to see this, today. There's a lot of streams and rivers and wetlands, and again, they're all interconnected with the groundwater system, and it provides a great place for recreation and wildlife, plants, and so on. New Jersey hosts, particularly Pinelands, hosts quite a variety of wild orchids, and most people don't realize that. If you go to these savanna areas in the Pinelands, you see these beautiful orchids. And of course, from a historical perspective, whether it was for sawmills or for the cranberry industry, water was always important. And I'd like to just focus on the cranberry industry a little bit because they certainly have a vested interest in clean, abundant sources of water. In a typical cranberry operation, such as this one, for each 1 acre bog, they need about 10 acres of upland. So they're very dependent on, again, clean, abundant sources of water.
And what's upland?
I'm sorry?
What is upland?
It's basically what you see, all just sands, pitch pines, and scrub oaks. You know, nothing next to streams, so to speak, or not too far away. But, you know, what you would see as you look around, you just see a lot of sand, scrub oaks, and pitch pines. Well, in New Jersey, we get about 44 inches of rain a year. And out of that, about 24 inches goes right back up into the sky. And then we get very little runoff, 2 to 3 inches, particularly in the heart of the pinelands. And the reason for that is because the sand is so porous. So it really works its way right back into the ground, except for areas where there's blacktop and roofs and impervious surfaces, then you naturally get a lot of runoff. But in the heart of the pinelands, or any place where there's sand at the surface, this is really the kind of runoff that we get. So what we're really left with is about 17 to 20 inches of that 44 inches that actually works its way into the ground. And then in cross section, you know, this is what we see. You know, the rain works its way into nearby streams, rivers, and wetlands, and provides the base flow for those water bodies. So what we do at the land surface, whether in the way of putting in impervious surfaces like blacktop and so on, or from pumping, which I'll get into in a few minutes, can affect the amount of water that we have available in our streams. And just a typical scene in the heart of the pinelands, probably on the Oswego or Batsto River. So typically, you know, in the pinelands and nationwide, this is what we see in the way of a stream system. You know, we have these headwater streams where streams start, and they're called first order streams. And then when they intersect, we get a second order stream. So when you hear that term headwaters, it's really first and second order streams. But these are the streams that over the years we typically abuse. You know, we put them in pipes, we put them in box culverts, and yet they make up 75% of the river miles nationwide. So that really is where the action is, to protect these small streams. You know, not the mesmerizing rivers that you see downstream. I mean, they get all their water from these first and second order streams. And, you know, just to see this in real life, which will be the next image, but, you know, in the Cohansey River, this could very well be the Mullica or the Oswego or any other river system, Rancocas. You know, we see these small streams that intersect, and these are the headwater streams. And it's not that hard to see that, you know, most of these small streams are what really makes up the river system. Next. You know, this is a great image because this is down in the Cohansey River watershed. There's a lot of agriculture, a lot of pumping going on. And again, you know, when you water a lot of these crops, there's a lot of evaporation. So they use a lot of water because of all the ag. And what you see here, these darker areas, these are streams where there's some, you know, vegetation associated with it, typically wetlands and some tree cover. But if you really look hard, you can see where some of these streams have been lost because of all the pumping. You know, you see here where this stream ends, but you can see this linear feature going up through here. That's a former stream. Maybe not a perennial stream, probably intermittent, but nonetheless gone. You look up here, you can just about make out where the stream system used to be. And then into here, it was kind of diverted with ditches and culverts. So, you know, it really does show you that, you know, as far as the pumping goes and the interaction between the groundwater system and the surface water system, you really can't separate those two. And unfortunately, we've done all kinds of crazy things for these small streams. And we put them in, like I said, box culverts and ditches such as this. And I can guarantee you, first day of trout season, you're not going to see many people lined up over here. And this is really what a natural corridor should look like. And, you know, a lot of organizations, Pinelands Preservation Alliance and others, you know, really, and particularly the land trust organizations, really try to purchase properties that have stream systems, and particularly those headwater wetlands and headwater areas. Next. As a geologist, I can't resist putting up a geologic map, but it really does show that New Jersey has quite a bit of exciting geology. You know, when you go to the Grand Canyon and you look down, we have all of that and much, much more. You see all that we call layer cake geology. We have rocks that are over 3 billion years old, and we have geology in the making right along the Jersey Shore with the waves moving sand and gravel up and down. The only thing that we're missing are the coal seams that we have out west because they've been eroded. But from a water resource perspective, you know, this line here is really important because north of this line, there's typically topography in the way of bedrock. So they're fortunate up in North Jersey where they can create reservoirs because they have mountains and valleys. Down here we don't have that luxury. You know, south of this line it's pretty flat. So we rely primarily on the groundwater system for drinking water, and you know, some water, treated water from the Delaware River, and a little bit in a few other places. But you know, all of these streams originate in the pinelands, and that's what really makes them unique because they're clean. We really don't have in the pinelands contaminated water bodies running through it. You know, kind of in a cartoon version, you know, we have basically 3 types of wells. You know, we have the shallow well, you know, the hand pump kind of wells. Nowadays, it's prohibited basically for installing domestic wells in shallow aquifer. You have to really go pretty deep. So most of the wells that we have nowadays are these confined wells where the streams go down below clay layers and reach water-bearing zones that are separated in general from the shallow aquifer. And then years ago there used to be so much pressure in these confined zones that the water would actually squirt out at the land surface. Next. And there was a well in Atlantic City that in the 1930s the water would do exactly that. It would squirt out about 30 feet above the land surface. Today, because of all the pumping going on in the Atlantic City area, that same well, the water level's down about 130 feet. So it just goes to show you how human activity and the demand on the water system has changed things. When we had wells like this, that hand well, it wasn't really a big deal. You can only pump so fast. But when you start to get large municipal supply wells, such as this, these are the tanks. The wells are usually associated with them not too far away. You know, things start to happen underground. And what happens is, you know, the well's pumping. This cone in block diagram, it's like a big funnel, goes out in various directions. And if it's in the confined aquifer, that's not too bad. But if it's in the shallow aquifer, you know, when that depression goes out, it intercepts streams, rivers, and wetlands, and that's where it starts to take most of the water from. Okay. You know, such as this. Now, 2 things happen. One, when these wells go online and they're pumping, they stop or intercept the water that normally would have worked its way into a nearby stream. And again, it's 360 degrees. And if the well is close enough to a stream or the pumping rate's high enough, it actually starts to take water out of streams, rivers, and wetlands. And we've seen a number of examples of that over the years here in the Pinelands and surrounding areas. One example is with regard to that one well, the Berlin well, right on the border of Burlington and Camden County. In like around 2020, that well went online. I started getting all kinds of phone calls that streams that were feeding our Marlton lakes were vanishing. And associated with that, those streams, was this particular plant. Anybody take a guess what that is? Swamping. And it's on both the state and threatened and endangered species list. And that was enough for us to convince the DEP to withdraw that water allocation. Because swamp pink Worldwide, there's only about 37 populations or groupings of this plant, and most of those are here in the pinelands. So for this particular plant, the pinelands and surrounding area really is the world's stronghold for it. So it was a big deal, and we had that well shut down. Next. Another example, and again, this is just to show you that, you know, pumping and the surface water is so interconnected, and that we really have to look at groundwater withdrawals as an environmental issue, the same way we look at you know, polluted streams as an environmental issue. Here's another example. A gentleman comes to me quite a few years ago, and he says, my 16-acre lake is vanishing. Well, I've been in the business long enough to know that that doesn't happen overnight. So, sure enough, went out there, and what you see here is 1 acre of the 16-acre lake, and this is a former sand pit. So there's no water flowing in and no water flowing out. So what are we really looking at here is the water table. It's like a big hand-dug well. And you can see where the water level used to be. And this is the deepest part of the lake. Well, to make a long story short, a cranberry operator excavated a 10-acre reservoir about 100 feet on that side of that tree line, and was basically pumping away and dewatering the whole area. Wetlands, the 16-acre lake, and a number of other water bodies. So we had that activity shut down. But again, it's just another example of we really need to look at groundwater withdrawals from an environmental perspective. So water conservation, and there's really two ways to look at and to kind of preserve the integrity of the environment, because the environment needs water. So just like people need water. So there's two ways to, I would hate to say ensure, but certainly make it easier for the environment to thrive, and that is by using water more efficiently. So we use less water, so there's more water available for the environment, and getting water back in the ground in the way of recharge. And those are the two things that we can do in a large scale and even on an individual basis. So water conservation can make a difference. And I always like to put this up because it just shows you how much water we use. So just think of some numbers that it would take to grow a head of lettuce, produce a loaf of bread, 1 egg, 1 hamburger, and 1 car. And you can see the level of processing increases as you go down this list. And these numbers are from the United States Geological Survey, so I didn't make them up. But 1 head of lettuce, 6 gallons, loaf of bread about 150, 1 quarter pounder, 1,300 gallons of water. Think about that. It's outrageous. And where do we have some of the largest cattle ranches in this country? Out west. It's no surprise why we're drying up the Rio Grande and the Colorado River. And then a car, 2-ton car, 65,000 gallons of water, produce transistors, plastic, rubber, glass, and all that stuff. So, just to give you some idea of what we use in the way of water. So, what can we do? That would be much better if we could. Okay. So what can we do? Over the years, when you look at how we use water and how it has changed, as a kid growing up, we never watered our lawns. But today, look how much water we use outdoors. Primarily lawn watering, certainly for vegetable gardens and car washing and so on. But these are the parts where we do have the ability to make changes, particularly indoors, to fix leaky toilets or more efficient toilets, which that's all you can buy nowadays anyway. And washing machines are becoming much more efficient. And showers, the low flow shower heads. These are all simple fixes. Leaks certainly make sense. Leaks in the faucet, shorter baths, shorter showers, and dishwashers. So this part we can make a difference year round, and this part of the equation really during spring, summer, and fall. Okay. So, you know, so how does that look in the way of groundwater? You know, how does our use of water affect a particular aquifer? So I just picked one aquifer, but there's about 6 different aquifers that we use in New Jersey, particularly South Jersey, and they all have basically the same trend. And I didn't want to go through all of them, but you know, this is Lower Potomac Raritan Magathie, which is used quite extensively a little bit further to the west of us, and that's the groundwater with time. And this downward trend actually started before 1965, but that's just where I started this graph. And you can see with time, you know, the water level in this aquifer going down, down, down. And around 1995, it went back up. So one important thing to look at here is that, you see how all these data points are so close together? So these are the yearly trends. You don't see much fluctuation, except for around 1970. And then you start to see the seasonal trends. So this would be winter, summer, greater demand, water level goes down. Winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer. And you can see the cumulative trend going down. So what do you think happened around the 1970s that we started to see this seasonal fluctuation so much in this one particular aquifer?
Baby boomers buying houses? Baby boomers buying houses?
That would be reflected in this, you know, long-term downward trend, but this is seasonal.
Irrigation.
Lawn watering. See, around the 1970s is when we started to fall in love with our lawns. And that's pure lawn watering. You see, you can really see how it gets worse with time. Then around 1995, you say, okay, well, this is good news, it went back up. And this is when the Department of Environmental Protection told the water purveyors using this one particular aquifer that they had to cut back 15 to 20%, which really meant to purchase water from New Jersey American, treated water from the Delaware River. And then the aquifer rebounded slightly, but it's pretty well planed off now. Next. So, you know, just to wrap this up, you know, just to give you some other numbers, you know, 18-hole golf course, 10 to 20 million gallons of water a month, and they take all their water from the shallow aquifer. They have to. Residential housing in a Pinelands Regional Growth Area, this is, you know, the statistical 3.2 people per household, 200 gallons per day per connection, peak monthly demand, that means July and August, about 230. And then lawn watering. You know, if you get one of those Home Depot specials and hook it up and turn it on for an hour, you can put out about 300 gallons of water. So here we are, right? Let's water the sidewalk. You know, we see so much of this, and to make it even worse, we see this kind of activity when it's raining out. I'll bet you're right around here today, you'll see sprinklers going, right? Next. But this is a good example of what really is doable. This is for Hamilton in Atlantic County, and they asked the Department of Environmental Protection for more water, and DEP told them, forget about it. Your average per capita consumption is so high per person, you have to deal with it first. So they tried a few voluntary methods, but in 2012, they did something really radical. The more water you use, the more you have to pay. Imagine that. People got that first water bill, and they wised up real quick. I mean, this is total annual volume in millions of gallons, and this is time. So within about a 9-month period, say a year, they went from 540 million gallons a year down to 420. And this is for a town that has a population of about 15,000 people. So they really embraced water conservation because it affected their wallet. You see, so this really does go to show you that you can make some changes and have an impact. And again, the more water that we use efficiently, the more is available for the environment. And this young lady is certainly dressed for the occasion of blueberry picking in Hamilton. And the ag folks, particularly the blueberry farmers, over the years have come a long way from those big water cannons that used to water Route 206, primarily, to drip irrigation. And they've greatly reduced their consumptive use of water, which again means more water available for the streams in the area. Next. Well, this is the back of our building. We never water our lawn. This is a hot July day. Hasn't rained in about 3 weeks. And that grass still looks pretty green. So most people water more than they really need to. Next. And this is what we're trying to protect, you know, by using water more efficiently. Next. I think we'll skip this because I'm running overboard here on time. So we'll just fast forward, Isabella. And I'll just say thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Quick question.
Yes.
I'm assuming it doesn't matter when you're watering your lawn, whether you're watering it from a public supply or a well on your property, it's still gonna drain from underneath the ground no matter what.
Well, and that's true. In most cases, you know, for example, Evesham gets most of their water from the deeper aquifers and from treated water from the Delaware River. Hamilton gets all of its water from the shallow groundwater system. So what they do has a much larger impact on streams and wetlands in the area. Towns that get all of their water, treated water from the Delaware River, there really isn't that much of an impact to the shallow groundwater system. So it's, you know, it's pretty regional or town specific. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I don't. I am I'm AV free tonight. I'm just gonna talk, put you guys to sleep. Alright, so my name is Jason Schaff. I'm with Mill Creek Apiary. I own Mill Creek Apiary. We produce honey and beeswax products. I perform honeybee removal services in the area. I'm right here in Medford. I do beekeeping education. And I also perform hive services for folks who want bees in their yards, but don't necessarily want to manage bees, learn about bees, and be responsible for them. So, kind of the the aquarium guy for beehives in the area. So, which is a lot of fun because I get to teach people about the bees. They can be as involved as they want in hive inspections. I love to educate. I love bees, and that's one of the reasons I appreciate you bringing me in tonight. Just because I want to bring awareness to the honeybee, change the perception a little bit about the honeybee, and how they fit into our environment, how beautiful they really are, and just like I said, bring awareness. So some of the reasons I love bees, they're amazing creatures. They're very interesting. They got a really interesting social structure. They're gentle. They generally don't sting. They're not aggressive insects. I'll go over some of that a little later. They have a very gentle temperament. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. My kids play within a few feet of the hives that I have at the house, and they've never been stung by the honeybees, coming out of the hive. Honeybees help our race, our human race, through pollination, through creating biodiversity in our environment. They provide us with a ton of healing substances. We have honey, there's propolis, pollen, and beeswax. These are all very healing substances that they provide us. And it's the only insect that we can care for. It's a form of animal husbandry. So it's exciting for me to be able to take care of the bees and to actually improve their life. They're the only insect that produces human food. with being honey. And there are about 20,000 different bee species in the world. So let's face it, I mean, honeybees are a very small percentage of pollinators, but they are one of the most crucial pollinators, one of the pollinators that farmers truly depend on to, you know, to pollinate our crops, the food we eat. And anybody know what the New Jersey state insect is? It's the honeybee. It is the honeybee. And there are many other states that have honeybee as a state insect, but that's a fun fact. So I kind of want to just bring awareness to the honeybee, as I said before. I would love to see more beehives in public places, in community gardens, you know, just, you know, community parks, things like that, so we can become a little bit more relaxed about the bees, more familiar with them. They are beautiful to have in our space. They do, you know, they bring peace and serenity to our surroundings. And there's no other way to expose folks to that aspect of them other than putting them out there and sort of, you know, just letting people get familiar with it. So tonight I just wanted to, quick agenda, wanted to go over the benefits of the bees, go over some other stinging insects that we're familiar with and some of the misconceptions around the honeybee, talk about CCD, which is colony collapse disorder, which was identified you know, about 15 years ago, and what it means today, and then talk about some ideas to directly impact honeybee and pollinator health, what we can do as far as the chemicals that we use and some of the plantings that we can think about putting in our own yards. So the benefits of the bees, number one is pollination. So bees and humans have been through a lot together. People began keeping bees as early as 20,000 BC. Keeping bees, 20,000 BC. And that's according to the late and eminent melittologist Eva Crane. So yes, someone who studies bees is a melittologist. And to put that length of time into perspective, the average global temperature 22,000 years ago was more than 35 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than today, and ice sheets covered large parts of North America. So beekeeping probably predates the dawn of agriculture, which occurred about 12,000 years ago, and likely made farming possible. So honeybees have been crucial to our food supply and are certainly today. Farmers are dependent on honeybee pollination to achieve the yields that they need because of the dense farming practices that they do now, as with the monocropping and things like that. Almonds, for example, are 100% dependent on honeybee pollination. Honeybees are the most important animal pollinator that we have. Pollination is responsible for about 1/3 of our food supply, and 100 crops in the U.S. rely on honeybee pollination solely. In New Jersey alone, about 60% of our fruits and vegetables rely on honeybee pollination. So apples, peaches, strawberries, blueberries, cranberries, pumpkins, cucumbers, squash, things like that are all dependent on honeybee pollination. So it's necessary for the fruit yield, necessary for the vegetable yield. It's also necessary for seed yield. So we don't necessarily think of pollination being required for root vegetables and carrots and broccoli, but it is. It's crucial for that seed production. In addition to pollination is biodiversity. Bees are really important for our general biodiversity. Having bees improves our soil and our water quality, thus helps with our climate regulation. When bees are present, it's a sign of a healthy environment. So bees, for example, in wineries, bees don't pollinate the grapes, but they're seen as a beneficial insect in those environments. Those environments are seen as healthier if honeybees are present. They're beneficial to the health, quality, and beauty of our green spaces. As I just spoke about, they're integral to our food chain cycle, and they have a strong economic value as well. So for raw materials, for our food supply, and also our livestock food supply, which ties into our food supply. So they are part of our very integral in our food system. I want to talk a little bit about what they produce in terms of honey, wax, pollen, propolis, honey. So the honey is the honeybees, and if anybody has questions, feel free to ask as I'm going along. I don't necessarily need to remember it till the end. So honey is the bees' carbohydrate source. They're collecting nectar through the summer months, spring, summer months, and fall to produce honey. That's their food source through the winter. And they store it in the honeycombs, which is made of wax, and that's what they eat through that honey store through the winter. Come the springtime, the flowers blossoming again, and they can go out and collect nectar again. One bee will make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their entire lifetime. 1 pound of honey, 1 jar of honey requires about 2 million blossoms. The bees to visit 2 million blossoms and about 50,000 miles of flight. That's a little over one time around the earth, just to make 1 pound of honey. So it's a very, it's a prized substance that we have. I think we all take it for granted a little bit, but it's a really special, and we'll get into some of the other products, but it's a very special substance that they make. Honey never goes bad. It's one food that we have on Earth that will never spoil because of low moisture content. It can't ferment. They have found honey in King Tut's tomb. It was used in embalming process, and it was still found in tombs and still edible. Pretty amazing. Honey is so healthy. It's got vitamins and minerals, enzymes. It's awesome for digestion, good for your skin health, good for your cell regeneration, and it's healing on your skin. It's topically. It's good for skin irritation, sores. It's actually used by hospitals now. It's something called Medi-honey, and it's impregnated bandages that the hospitals use to treat sores for people who don't respond well to modern medicine. And it's been used for thousands and thousands of years, since ancient times. Ancient Egyptians, even back into ancient China, they've been using honey. Second is wax. So wax is what the bees, they use wax to build their honeycomb, which is where they store their food and their babies, their brood. It's collected by beekeepers after we harvest the honey, and that wax, that clean wax, the cappings that come off the honeycomb, is used for cosmetics and soaps and lotions and embalming. It's used in the dentistry industry and field. It's used to make crayons and, of course, candles. Candles, the beeswax candles, they burn longer, they burn brighter, they burn cleaner. It's just a beautiful, the beeswax candles are a beautiful product. So it takes about 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So again, that's another very precious resource inside the hive. So we talked about honey, wax, pollen. Pollen is what the bees bring into their hive for their protein source. So the nectar and the honey is their carbohydrates, the pollen is their protein. They collect it in small pollen baskets on their back legs and bring it back to the hive. We collect it at the hive entrance, and for humans, for human food, it's actually a whole food. It's a complete food. We could survive on pollen alone and a roughage source if we had to. It's got all the vitamins, minerals. It's got 23 essential amino acids. It's got everything we need to sustain life. And it's also an amazing anti-inflammatory. People with autoimmune disease symptoms are finding a lot of relief taking honeybee pollen. Like I said, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. It's just another amazing product. Propolis. Propolis, wow. Propolis is Has anyone heard of propolis? So propolis it's very common in Europe. It's the resinous substance that the bees collect from trees and other plants. They bring it into the hive, and they actually coat the inside of the hive with this substance. It's a very sticky substance. It's antibacterial, it's antimicrobial, and it's their immune defense. So actually, if the individual bee's immune system is not very advanced, they use this, their immune defense is this propolis that they coat the hive with. It's been used as medicine since Aristotle, 350 BC. It's been used by ancient Egyptians in the mummification process, and by ancient Greeks for its wound and tumor healing abilities. Right now, there's currently hundreds of scientific studies going on focusing on propolis as a cancer treatment for us. It's anti-tumoral, and because of its anti-tumoral and anti-cancer properties. So it's just an amazing, you can take the propolis, it's very sticky, you can grind it into a powder, just ingest it, you can put it on your skin products, it's great topically, and it treats candida, it stops herpes reproduction, it prevents and stops colds and sore throats. So again, in Europe, they use throat sprays that are made of propolis, and it fights intestinal parasites. It's an amazing medicine. It improves fertility in women with endometriosis, and it's gaining recognition here. So if it's something worth looking into as an alternative to common medicine. And lastly is apitherapy. So apitherapy it's bee venom therapy or bee sting therapy. It's actually taking the bees, either using the venom and injecting it, or taking bees and injecting it into letting the bees sting an area of that's in pain, or to treat illness. So MS patients are getting a lot of relief from bee sting therapy. People with arthritis, shingles, injuries, wounds, pain, burns, tendinitis. These are all conditions that are treated with bee sting therapy. So this goes back to ancient Greece and China. So this stuff's been being done for thousands of years, and we've gotten away from some of these techniques. Reduces the need for traditional medicine, and it works by triggering our own body's immune response. So it's a bee sting, and you're sending all these antibodies to the area that stung, thus, bringing over time bringing relief to that area. Does anybody have any questions about any
How
of
come the
those?
bees don't stick to the propolis?
The propolis, how come
Yes.
they don't stick to it?
It's
Well,
sticky,
when they coat
It's like
the
their
inside of
insulation in their house, right?
it is, and because there's such a thin coating of it inside, it's not a thick. When you open up the hive, it's not thick. I mean, we find the
Is
stickiness.
there a little
I got it on my
honey stuck to the
hands.
wall kind of thing?
Yeah, there's not a bunch of
Alright.
bees stuck to the wall. It actually gets kind of hard and resinous.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like an epoxy. It can be chipped off. And on hot days like today, it's very sticky, and where it's built up, they use it to seal cracks. You'll find if mice get into the hive in the winter, they'll coat it in propolis. So you'll find small animals that are covered in that stuff.
That'll teach them.
Embalmed essentially in that. Pretty amazing. Anybody else have any questions about? All right, so some of the misconceptions of honeybees. So when I talk to people about honeybees, the first question is how often you get stung, and we associate honeybees with wasps and yellowjackets and all these other insects that we're afraid of, and I understand why. They look similar, and they're a bee. But honeybees are gentle. They're generally non-aggressive, unless their nest is directly threatened. If their queen is threatened, they only sting once. Honeybees they are disemboweled once they sting because they have barbs in their stinger. they can only sting once. They're interested in flowers, nectar sources, pollen sources. They're not interested in us. They're not interested in our hamburger, our hot dog, or eating or at a picnic. Wasps, on the other hand, these are all wasps, yellowjackets, paper wasps, honeybees. They're all yellow and black stripy insects, so we put them all into the same category. But yellowjackets, they're ground nesters. They are spring carnivores, and they're late summer scavengers for sugars. So they are very aggressive. That's why they're coming after us at our picnics, because they're scavengers. They'll sting multiple times. Unlike the honeybee, they'll sting once. And there are thousands in their nests. So the yellowjackets are usually the ones. I'll get called often, people thinking that they have honeybees. I've got a honeybee infestation, and they're mostly yellowjackets that I'm getting called for. Paper wasps, they also can have black and yellow stripes. They nest above ground. They're also very aggressive. They'll sting multiple times as well. And they're not scavengers, so they're less likely to pester us at picnics. And they're omnivores, but they're also pretty aggressive. So the wasps are usually the ones that are mistaken for honeybees. We have hornets, bald-faced hornets, the big nests, the big soccer ball-shaped nests that are up in the trees. Those are bald-faced hornets. Not only, but that's typically what I'm seeing when I go out on a call is bald-faced hornets in those nests. And then we have the European hornets, which are about 2 inches long, very big, aggressive hornets. Then we have bumblebees. Bumblebees nest underground. About 100 individuals in the nest. They'll attack only when they're threatened, and they can sting multiple times. So bumblebees are pretty non-aggressive bees. I'm bringing all these up because they're all awesome pollinators. All of these bees, honeybees, wasps, hornets, bumblebees, they all have their place in our ecosystem. They're all worth, none of them should be killed if you can help it. The last is solitary bees. So solitary bees, there are minor bees that grow that nest in the ground. I've gotten a lot of calls this year for minor bees. People, I don't know if it's the season, but there are a ton of them out there. They're the ones that have the little holes in sandy soil, and you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, in your front yard. They are awesome bees. They're great pollinators. They're non-aggressive. Completely worth just letting them do their thing and waiting a few weeks, and the activity will subside. They rarely, if ever, sting. Okay, very gentle. And then we have mason bees. They're another solitary bee. They nest above ground in hollowed out stems and things like that. Anybody have any questions about the other types of bees that they're often, yeah?
That European bee, I think it likes to feed on my hummingbird feeders. Would that make sense?
It very well, yeah.
I think
They're actually,
its tail is as big as my pinky sometimes.
they're about 2 inches long.
Mhm.
Actually, they're carnivores too. They feed on my honeybees. And so
Oh.
we see them hang out
So
around hives, and
we don't want them right now.
they all, if they're not threatening us, I say leave them be. I mean, they're all, like I said, they all have a place in our environment, and I don't think any of them deserve to be killed. Yes.
2 questions. One, what are the big black ones that you see flying around, especially at this time of year? They make a lot of noise, but they don't.
Oh, those are carpenter bees. Yeah, so the
Yeah.
carpenter bees, they don't sting, but they can bite,
Okay.
and they typically don't. They're just they act very aggressively. They dive bomb. They're at eye level. It's their mating cycle right now. Again, they're very active now for the next couple weeks, and then it will settle down. It's sort of like the ground nesters, the minor bees. Yeah.
Is there a way to differentiate the honeybee from the other bees easily?
Yeah. So I've got. handouts, but I'm gonna pass this around. So this is bald-faced hornet, Yellowjacket. This is the honeybee, the circle one with the green check. Paper wasp, bumblebee, and this is the European hornet. So maybe that'll help a little bit. Okay, so that,
Question?
yeah,
If honey is the food that the bees keep to sustain themselves through the winter, and you harvest the honey, do you have to give them a replacement food to get through the winter?
so we leave enough honey on the hive to get them through the winter. Typically it's about 60 to 90 pounds, depending on the climate. But honey is it's an easy thing to measure to give back to them. We know about how much they need to get them through our winter, so we can put that amount on the hive. If we have a goofy winter and it's very warm and there's a lot of activity in the hive and they're out flying a lot, thus going through a lot of their food stores, we may have to supplement in the springtime with sugar or some other substitutes just to get through that. The most dangerous time of a beekeeper's cycle is that early spring when it's warm enough for the bees to fly, but there are no nectar sources yet. Because they're out there, they're expending a lot of energy and going through a lot of that's when a lot of bees die. And that is like a 2 or 3 week period.
Do you have a recommendation for nectar sources at that time of the year, like a plant that?
So I've actually got a list of like the crocuses. Crocuses are awesome. One of the things I did want to talk about was not Lily of the Valley.
Because there's very few things that will bloom that early.
Yeah, and the dandelions, crocuses, that's really what, and everyone's cutting their dandelions back. Which,
That could be part of it.
this is called Blooms for Bees, How to Provide Pollen and Nectar Sources. So these are some of the early trees. And here's 2 or 3 pages of plants there you can take a look at. And when their blooming times. Colony collapse disorder, just want to go over that briefly so everyone understands when they hear that, what that means. CCD, colony collapse disorder, identified in 2006, 2007. There was a couple years there when there were bee die-offs in the sort of 70-90% range. Beekeepers were freaking out. The bees were literally disappearing. There wasn't a pile of bees outside the hive. The bees just left. They didn't know what it was. Scientists, there was this immediate community get together to try to figure it out. It still hasn't been definitively answered. That was 90% losses. We're experiencing 30% losses on a regular basis now. So there still is some, and that's year to year. So through the winter, you go into the winter with 100 hives. You expect to come out of the winter with 70 hives, let's say, and that's a pretty common. Those are common numbers. So we manage for that. We prepare for that. The reasons for that. And this kind of gets back into what we're talking about tonight. There are environmental reasons. There are farming practice, modern farming practices, and then there are pests and diseases. Environmentally, we're losing a lot of honeybee habitat. We're taking out forests and fields, and we're putting up houses and shopping malls. So that's a big one. Loss of habitat. There's just less forage for the bees, less nectar sources. Modern farming practices, monocropping, single food source is not good for the bees. Modern beekeeping practices also is moving the bees from crop to crop to pollinate, which is not a healthy thing for the bees necessarily. They need a varied diet, just like we need a varied diet. Bees will go, they'll find the nectar sources and the pollen sources that have the vitamins that they need for their colony at that time. So they're not just going out and getting everything they can. They're specific about what they're bringing back to the hive based on their nutritional needs. Pesticides and herbicides. So pesticides are called, the chemical is they're neonicotinoids. Neonics have been, about a year ago, were banned in Europe. There were three of them that were banned in Europe. In the US, we haven't banned any of them yet. But Europe is recognizing neonicotinoids as being dangerous to the bee population. If it's dangerous to the bee population, it's dangerous to the human population. So they have, they took steps to ban those chemicals.